for a long time, I've known that hardstyle is known as the martial art of strength training. So that's one thing. And a lot of people that are around the circles for a long time never dispute that because the correlation is there. But furthermore, when you look at the roots of hardstyle, they come from like martial arts.
Today's guest is Aponte. Oz is a StrongFirst Elite Team Leader, strength coach, and a former U.S. Army Sergeant, with over 20 years of experience training and teaching human movement. He comes from a martial arts background that includes Praying Mantis Kung Fu, wrestling, and boxing, along with years of contemporary dance experience. What makes Oz a unique guest is he has both the yin and yang, real strength and real mobility. He's powerful, but also relaxed in control, strong, but not stiff. The balance shows in clearly how he trains and how he teaches. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree and is currently working on his Master in Kinesiology with a focus on biomechanics, using science to better understanding what good training actually looks like in the real world. In this episode, we talk about how simplicity as a path of mastery, long-term mindset in training, and how strength and martial arts support each other when the goal is to train for life. Let's get started. Hello, Oz. Welcome to the Studio Podcast.
Hello, my friend. Good to see you again.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation in 2026. It gives me a lot of motivations. And before we get started, I wanted to learn more about your martial art background. I know that you study Praying Mantis Kung Fu, correct?
Correct.
What drove you into training martial art at a young age?
It was by a little bit by luck. I was spending the summer with my father, and I was asked by a family member if I wanted to join in to go take this class, the Taekwondo class. And so I went down and I took a free class, and it was really fun. And then when the summer was over, I went back home and I started to practice Taekwondo. It was through a school called the Young Brothers Taekwondo Academy. And there were a lot of them all throughout Puerto Rico. I don't know to what degree they were kind of like popular in the rest of the world, but I know that in Puerto Rico, there were a lot of academies. And I think in the Caribbean in general, they were pretty popular. But I was there for about 6 months. And on my way home from practice, I would walk by this Kung Fu school. And they would usually be there as I was walking towards my other class. And when I was coming back, they were still practicing. Their practice was longer. And that was really kind of like appealing to me. I was like, man, like I would love to do this for an extra 30 minutes, you know? So I peeked my head in one day, and the instructor asked me, if I had practice, and one thing led to the other. And I ended up going to the Kung Fu school. And that has become, Praying Mantis has become like the main martial arts that I've practiced throughout my life, even though I practice Kyokushinkai karate and traditional karate, not in a formal way, but just more like sharing with friends. You'll meet a friend somewhere and maybe they practice that style and they're like, hey, let me show you this thing or whatever, right? But formally, it was really Praying Mantis Kung Fu. And of course, we'll talk about the boxing and the wrestling later, but that was the main thing. And I fell in love with it because it gave me something really positive and fun to target my energies towards because I was only 13 years old. And so, it was a very productive way to spend my evenings, after school and things like that, doing things. And for whatever reason, I don't have a good explanation for this, I was always drawn to that kind of structure of trying to do something that felt, good and physical and positive, and being around other fun people that were doing the same thing.
We know each other prior to this interview, and I always see you as the yin and yang. You have great flexibility, but you also have very good strengths. And you told me that you learned how to do the split at age 12. Can you tell me more about that? Because that's one of the things that I still have on my bucket list.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed right away at the school, especially when I was doing the Taekwondo, was that a lot of the gentlemen and the ladies that were more advanced in the school could all do the splits.
Hmm.
And so that became something like, I mean, I'm very young. I don't really have a good frame of reference for how I'm evaluating what I'm seeing. But what I did know was that the people that were seemed to be really good, they were able to do the splits. And for some reason, I was like, okay, I think I want to do that. And so I would sit in front of the TV watching cartoons and stuff like that with my legs open, and I would eat my meals on the floor with my legs open like that. And within 6 months, I was doing it pretty regularly. And to this day, I can still do it, which is really convenient and fun to show people because obviously, being an older athlete, people don't expect that. But especially in the environment that you and I met, within the Strong First community as certifications, somebody will be like, what do you think about flexibility? And I'm like, I think it's really important. And I'll just drop into the splits and, kind of prove the point, right? Like, yeah, it's really, really important. So, yeah.
Well, life is not fair, right? So I do that too, but I don't have my split. What's going on there? And you answered a great question. Actually, a lot of people think that if you're muscle bound, if you do strength training, you are bound with the muscle. Your tendon is not flexible. But you kind of define that you could have both at the same time. Is it true?
It is absolutely true. And there are very many examples out there of this. In modern times, we've seen an increase in the size of gymnasts in the Olympics at the national level and the world level. And you will see that there are some athletes that look like they could be on a fitness competition stage and compete in like a fitness type, like not quite bodybuilding, but they're pretty built and developed with a lot of muscle mass. And they can still not only do the splits, but also incredible back flexibility, shoulder flexibility. So there's other realms of it as well. A good example of this, and perhaps some of your audience may be familiar with this through the martial arts, but there's a guy out there that goes by the name of Juji Mufu, I think, and he's a very very muscular dude, and he can do the splits. Um, I think he has a video out there that went viral a long time ago where he was doing the splits on two chairs and also holding a 135-pound weight overhead, like a barbell and a couple of
Hmm.
45-pound plates. And I just remember seeing that and thinking like, wow, like we have evolved as a species.
What would be the right balance? So obviously, if we train for like the strongest men, then we're big in size. We maybe could not move as fast. I think that's what the martial artists come into. They want to be fast. They want to be agile, right? What would be the right balance from a strength coach like yourself, who also have great flexibility? Is there a certain point that you must say, okay, maybe if you want to martial art focus, that might be like the biggest, whatever that might be means to you, that you should be. You shouldn't go any bigger.
Yeah. I don't think there's any limit, honestly. Like I've seen some, especially also because not only did I do martial arts, but I was also in the dance world for a long time, and my wife is a dancer. So I see a lot of dancers that are quite flexible and muscular as well. So there's plenty of examples that I personally have seen that tell me that. But here's the thing, the fear that you may become slow or not agile enough, it's really something that pertains more to the way that you train, right? So if you make enough time to devote to your skills practice in martial arts, so you're practicing your forms, you're practicing your calisthenics, and all the things that we traditionally associate with traditional martial arts training, and you add a very Spartan like, very simple strength training routine, it is unlikely that you will develop large muscles from that. You will get some muscle tone, but you're not going to blow up like a bodybuilder, right? It takes a lot of the right eating, the right training, and the right resting in order for you to develop the kind of musculature that would make you muscle bound and be to somebody like a Jade Cutler, if from back in the day, was a very impressive physique on stage for bodybuilding. But when you see these guys walk around the shows and stuff like that, you can see there's some limitations there, right? And
Hmm.
so at our level, it would take an incredible effort to get to that level, and it's probably unlikely to happen without some extra effort. You know what I mean? So it's something that maybe we don't have to worry about so much.
Yeah, thanks for answering the question. That's like a endless debate, right? You can't lift any weight. It will make you slow, or it will make your arm slower. But when you look at a person, martial artists, especially when you look at how they walk, how they have the swagger, or are they stiff, you could probably tell how good and what kind of level they are because a good martial artist is never stiff when they walk.
100%. And this is an interesting topic to me and one that I love dearly because I love gait analysis. So what it's both a gift and a curse because when I'm walking down the street, when I see people walk, I'm kind of like, like, oh my God, like I could really help that person with their gait. But you're correct. Like, I mean, fighters do this all the time, right? Especially if you have any kind of martial arts training, you learn how to like measure people up in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that has to do with the way that they move. Are their feet turned out? Are their arches collapsed? What are their shoulders doing? Are they rounded forward, like back? Do they have like some kind of asymmetry in their body? All of these things can give you clues as to how well somebody moves and what kind of activities they do on the regular, right? They're not always 100% accurate, but they can put you in the ballpark, and it's better than not having any information at all.
Nice. I know we're skipping ahead a lot, but I know from your martial art journey, I want to find out what leads you to become a trainer yourself.
So the very first time that I experienced what it was like to be in front of someone and lead them in a sense of like martial arts or any kind of exercise or anything like that was a time when somebody popped into our school and our instructor just casually said, hey, Oz, can you come and continue the warm up? And he went and talked to the person and they talked for a while. So I was able to lead the entire class through the remainder of the warm up. And I was ecstatic. I was so happy. It was such a cool thing to be asked to do by our martial arts instructor. And then he asked me a second time for whatever reason, and a third, and then it became like this thing. So then it was like, hey, you want to warm up the class? Yeah. And so at a very early age, I became acquainted with how wonderful it felt to be in front of the group and share what I knew with them because it was a real community, right? We all practice multiple times a week together. So there's a sense of like brotherhood and sisterhood in the school. And to not only have your instructor be the one to ask you to do that, to trust you with that, but to have the support of your classmates as well. Like, hey, that was really good. It's very empowering and encouraging. So then when I went into the Army, the very first time that I was asked to do that, I didn't think about it. I was like, can I? Absolutely. So pretty much everywhere that I went, there was a very natural kind of like push towards like, hey, would you like to do this? Because apparently a lot of people did not want to do it. They were, they had anxiety about it, or they didn't feel like they knew enough or something like that, where I always felt like, yeah, I'll do it. And because I had so much practice early on, as we both know, the more you expose yourself to some kind of task like that, the better you're going to get quicker. So, it was very fortunate that I got to do it when I was very young. And by the time I went into the military in my 20s, I already had a lot of practice. And so when I exited the military, it made the most sense for me. And, there was no question of what I was going to do while I was attending school. And I was like, I'm going to become a personal trainer. And so I did. As soon as I got out, I took a little bit of time off. But one of my, first official jobs was personal training. I've been doing that ever since.
Thanks for sharing that. I believe that, teaching is learning yourself because a lot of us might be good at what we do, but if we ask to teach someone else who knows nothing about skills or profession, how to do it, a lot of us cannot do it. It's one thing to look at, oh, okay, they're doing it all wrong, but are you able to use your word or maybe your action so then they can also learn to do what you're trying to show them to do? It's not an easy task.
That is an excellent point, and it's something that I think about often. And it's like, what makes a good teacher, right? Because we've been around other teachers, and we have our opinions. Like, wow, that guy was really great. I learned so much from them. And other people, maybe not so much. And it's not that they're bad teachers or anything like that. It's just that when you compare it to the level of instructor that's out there, it doesn't kind of rise up to that. And I have some theories. I think part of it is if you've had some difficulties yourself in coming up through the ranks, that person tends to be a better teacher, in my opinion. And perhaps the reason is because they had to figure out some things early on, and now you can pass that on to the other person. If you are gifted, if you are talented, and you didn't have to navigate through some of these obstacles, and you have a student that is going through that, I think with experience, somebody can learn how to break these things down for someone who doesn't get it. But the person that didn't get it already has that experience in them. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So when your student comes to you and they're like, oh man, I'm really stuck in this one thing. If you went through that on your journey to being an instructor, man, you're like the best reference, right? You can be, don't worry, I got you. I know exactly what to do, right? And so I think that's part of it. It's like we have a camp of people that are very talented, athletically gifted, physically, they just look at the weights and they're buff instantly, they look at a move and they can do it instantly, right? So it's like, it's not all of us had that. And when we had to navigate through the obstacles, I think it turns us into better instructors.
I think that's a really good point because, like the talented athletes, right? So they can just do it without knowing why. But maybe for most of us, we need to do like 10 years of prep to get to that level. So I think for finding a right teacher and right instructor is a person that who could save you 10 years of training just by looking at
Absolutely.
you and pointing you to the right direction so you don't go around in a circle.
I 100% agree with you.
I know that we both associate with StrongFirst, the School of Strengths. I'd like to get your take on the what StrongFirst called the hostile training, and how would you see the correlation with how we train in traditional martial arts?
For a long time, I've known that hardstyle is known as the martial art of strength training. So that's one thing. And a lot of people that are around the circles for a long time never dispute that because the correlation is there. But furthermore, when you look at the roots of hardstyle, they come from like martial arts. It's a combination of military training and martial arts. So from that perspective, it's like a on the nose, if you will, the comparison. Here's another part. When you study martial arts, you learn a couple of things very early on. You learn how to breathe properly to support what you're doing, and you learn a series of postures that you're supposed to learn and kind of assimilate in order to give you the foundation so that then you can do the forms and the sets and spar and go from your front kick to your jumping front kick and your turning kick to your jumping turning kick and so on and so forth. So there's this very clear path with this basic vocabulary that really, really at its most fundamental level is just a bunch of postures. And then you have the breath behind it to support them. When you study hardstyle, that is exactly what you learn first. You learn a series of movements that are basic and what the posture should look like. There's a very defined criteria for what a hardstyle swing or hardstyle deadlift or goblet squat, double front squat, press, any of those things looks like, right? And then we support that heavily, robustly with the way that we breathe behind it. And so when you think about it that way, it's almost like it's like the same thing. But just now you just have a weight in your hand.
Yeah, I remember when I attend my kettlebell certification, I was told how to bring on more muscle so I have a better grip. It tell us to, squeeze your glutes, bring your kneecap up and then bring everything on the opposite hand to bring power to your hand. Actually, want to hold the power. It's similar when I listened to my sensei in karate when he told me, don't just punch with your arm, right? You got to use your hip into it, push your foot down, using all the muscle and remember to turn your hip. I started my kettlebell journey first and then go into karate. And I could see the correlation. I just replaced a few words. The instruction are almost the same.
Yeah. Especially, you just made a perfect example, right? You talked about bringing up the kneecaps and cruising your glutes. To the naked eye, to the untrained eye, if they looked at both of us, when we're doing kettlebells, they would not be able to discern those things right immediately. Only a skilled practitioner who's gone through the system understands that that's the technique. Similarly, when you do martial arts and you're doing, let's say, a set, and you see a like a master practitioner that's been doing martial arts for like 30 years, and he's doing like a basic form, the thing that you learn on your first month of training, and you see also a beginner side by side doing it. To the naked eye, to the untrained eye, it will look like they're doing the same thing. But for someone who understands the martial art, that specific martial art, they will see massive differences in how the movements are being performed, right? So even from that perspective, to your point, it can be compared in that way, right? It's like these little details and nuances that you need to understand, and only time can bring about that mastery.
Yeah, and then with training, you know that there are different muscles, different strategy that you could recruit, right, to make you lift heavier weight, do your punch stronger, or when you do spin kick, knowing where to look
Yeah,
can make you hit the right target or and not spinning out.
I know. I had such a hard time with that early on. I remember practicing and I was like my focus wasn't in the right place with my gaze and I kept like spinning out of it. And I was like, why can't I get this? And then somebody pointed out like you need to look at your target.
Yeah. Let's talk about your experience training in the end of the kettlebell. I'll let you explain what the program is like, and then I'll ask you some follow-up questions.
Sounds good. The Enter the Kettlebell program, also known as the Rite of Passage, is a classic hardstyle kettlebell program that includes very few movements, but you're going to have ample opportunity to practice them to the degree where you're going to master this in a very short amount of time. The movements are a clean and press with the kettlebell. Now, for those of you that do not know what that looks like, the kettlebell looks like a cannonball with a handle, and you would place your hand on the handle, swing that piece of metal between your legs, and by utilizing your hips, you're going to extend your body violently and catch it in a position that we call the rack position. Now, the rack position is very similar. It's if you were good to square off to fight someone with your fist nest to your to on both sides of your chin, right? Like protecting and ready to strike and both defend. The rack position is very similar to that. From there, you proceed to press the kettlebell overhead. That would be one of the movements. And then in addition to that, you have this movement called ballistics. And the ballistics are more aggressive hip snaps that you do. You swing the kettlebell between your legs and you violently extend by pressing your feet through the ground and make the kettlebell float. You essentially make it ballistic by moving it faster than gravity can pull it. And then you have a third exercise. It's called the snatch. And that one goes directly overhead. And these are basically the four movements because the clean and the press are two different movements. So clean and press, snatch and swings. 4 exercises, 3 times a week. That's all you're going to do. There is a very elegant way to organize your training sessions, starting with very low volume on day one, a little bit more on the middle day. And then on your last day, that's the day when you go all out. And after also often the day that you will test your skills every 2 or 3 months if you want to. The beauty of this program is that if you do this, it will still allow you to practice fully your martial art if you are deep into that. And it will allow you to do it even if you're a beginner, because obviously, when you're learning a new skill, it is a greater tax on your physiology versus being intermediate or advanced. If you're an advanced martial artist and you add strength training, that is not as difficult as learning martial arts and strength training simultaneously. That is a greater ask from your system. It's a greater ask from your physiology. It's a greater ask on your behalf, on your discipline to sleep well, eat really well, and all those stuff, right? So with this program, it is such a minimalist approach that if you were practicing martial arts at any level, it's going to allow you to continue to do that unencumbered and still add some gains in the strength and explosiveness and resiliency and even like body awareness that we all develop when we do strength training.
Thanks, Oz. You put it perfectly. And Oz actually wrote an article and spoke about the details in the program training in a podcast and in an article, which I will attach in the show notes. But for our conversation, I wanted to ask you other questions. You did that for 3 years, correct?
Correct.
Walk us through the process. So from the beginning, you're learning the program, you're adjusting to it. So what happened? What have you discovered like maybe 6 months in? And I'll ask you more follow-up question later.
Sure. So the beginning of the program has what they call a break-in period. And during that period, what you're going to do, excuse me, just burp. What you're going to do is you're going to practice, and I put that in air quotes, you're going to practice because I don't think that in Western society we associate lifting weights with practice. Typically, lifting weights is working out, but in a very unique way, the way that we try to share this through hardstyle and the School of Strength and StrongFirst is that we try to encourage people to approach their strength base or the strength practice or strength skill as a practice. So that means that you have permission to stop at any point because the quality of your movement is now going down.
Hmm.
Versus a more Western approach where I would say, well, sorry, you're not going to get stronger if you don't push through this. You're just going to have, I know they look ugly right now, but you got to keep going. We don't train that way, right? I would rather you put the bell down today if it's starting to look a little ugly and you get some better reps in tomorrow. And what we are trying to do, just like with martial arts, is get more frequent practice and more daily practice than intense practice that's going to put you out for a few days, right? So early on, I was immediately drawn to that. And then about 6 months into it, I think the big discovery, not so much a discovery, more a relief that nothing was left on the table per se, right?
Hmm.
I could have done this and maybe I could have been like, oh man, that was a big mistake. I should have done all the fancy, complicated, long workout, I'm sore kind of thing, right? But I actually felt better. I felt fresher for my practice. I felt um, more energy all around. My body composition was really low, but I still felt really strong for my size. I felt mobile. I felt like it wasn't hindering my flexibility because one of the characteristics of the style of training is that we encourage full range of motion through the movements. So all of these things were becoming not just the promise. It wasn't just the promise, right? Because that's when you purchase the materials and you talk to people that are teaching you how to do this, they're telling you this is what you can experience. But
Mhm.
until you walk that path yourself, you won't know. It could have been a disaster, but it wasn't. So I was just relieved that it was a great situation for me. I felt good. I looked good. I was able to do other things, and it was a successful campaign, so to speak.
And just to confirm, at the end of the kettlebell program is the only thing that you've done in the 3-year period. You didn't, cheat or did other things or did crunches or other things, right?
So the few things that I did were part of the plan, right? Because
Mhm.
obviously a kettlebell, it's a difficult thing to travel with. And over the course of 3 years, most individuals are going to have to take a trip somewhere, somehow. So
Mhm.
those trips for me came in the form of dance tours because I was dancing a lot at the time. I was part of a local company here in San Diego. And when I went on tour, we would be out for 2 or 3 weeks and I couldn't bring my kettlebell. It wasn't
Right.
practical, especially if it was overseas. So at those moments, I was utilizing movement vocabulary from the body weight curriculum, same system, same strong first. Well, this is pre-strong first, but it was hardstyle. Let's just call it that. And I was applying that. So and during those times, I was doing like single leg squats and one arm push-ups. And if I could find a pull-up bar, I would do that. Um, which in fact the pull-ups do become part of my program eventually after a while as well. So there was that. And then there was one other thing. The program has 3 days that are mandatory and they have a very strict thing that you do.
Mm.
But there are 2 other days that they call variety days that if you want to, you could add other things. For example, a very popular option is to follow a power to the people deadlift programming. Power to the people is just another program by Pavel, the founder of StrongFirst, where it's very minimalistic but it leads to great strength gains. And in that one, you're only doing 2 sets of deadlifts, not counting your warm-ups. And in the context of putting it together with the ETK, it was only twice a week. And I did that because I wanted to compete in a competition that was part of the StrongFirst community. It was called the Tactical Strength Challenge.
Yeah.
And you're familiar, yep. So,
Mhm.
so I, I, I didn't do like a 3-month cycle of deadlifts. I didn't do that. Okay. I just simply exposed myself enough to the stimulus twice a week with very low volume so that I could safely compete and have fun and not hurt myself. But that
You
was it.
probably did pretty well on the snatches, right?
I did 107 or 9 on my first TSC. I've done 3 of them. I
Wow.
know that I've done 107, 109, and 111, and I don't remember the order, but it's in that range. So a little bit more than what we're required to do for our testing.
Yeah, if any of you don't know what a snatches is, 5 minutes time limit on the technical strength challenge. You do as many as you can within that 5-minute period. If you have ever tried that, you know that it could be equivalent to fighting two rounds of boxing, kickboxing, whatever that you have it. It's not an easy task to do.
Yeah, 100%.
Speaking of that, because nowadays with social media, our attention span is like 15 seconds or less, right? So, what is the one thing good that you think happened because you spent 3 years training? And also at the same time, on the opposite side, did any way during the training that you feel bored with the training program? Can you talk about both sides?
Okay. I can tell you up front that I never felt bored with the training. I felt like everything that I was doing was allowing me to do other things that I wanted to do, and I found great value in that. So that was an incentive to continue. It didn't overwhelm my efforts. I was able to do other things, and it progressed from being a single 20 kilo kettlebell where I was doing the protocol, and once you hit a certain number, you can go up in weight. So my second progression was the 24 kilo. My third progression was to add pull-ups, which is part of the program, and that's in the materials. If you purchase this book, which I highly recommend everyone tries it at least for 3 months, it will break down how you add that, and it's a very simple thing. It's basically the same scheme. And in my article, I also talk about that. Then you can go with double kettlebells, and that's a whole other bag of worms that it's incredibly challenging, and you will not be bored by doing that. So there's a lot of things, little tweaks that you can do to the exact same routine, but just a little more weight sometimes. Sometimes it's the double, sometimes you add the pull-ups, and all of that can lead to a lot of fulfillment and not feeling that sense of like, oh my God, I'm so bored with this stuff. But I'm also like I think a lot of people would consider most of my training boring because I like
Mm.
structure and you and I have had multiple interactions when the idea of the horse stance comes up, because that's the ultimate like example of like discipline and just patience on the part of a student to just be like, man, like this is not very sexy, but I know that it's going to lead to a lot of good adaptations that I'm going to need to do the really cool stuff down the road. And so I felt like the things that I was learning through the program were cementing those things, right? So my clean and press got really good. My snatch got really good. My swings got really good. So it allowed me to practice these things to a level of mastery that I was able to accomplish probably a lot quicker if I had been jumping around through different programs.
So I think what you talk about is simplicity. I don't think it's boring, as you're saying. If you think it's too easy or too hard for you, you could dial up or dial back down. So it wasn't just static and set in stone. You actually within the same program, you're changing maybe the intensity, right? Maybe you're not feeling that good that day. Maybe you dial back a little bit. But why do you think that nowadays? I blame on social media that people find it hard to commit it to something more simple and they want to keep bounce around and try to, especially we're talking in the earlier part of 2020 for a new year resolution. People give up within like 3 weeks. I see a lot of people at the gym right now that I worked out at, but I think after January, I won't see them anymore.
When you have too many options, sometimes that could be a problem, right? And we have a lot of options. So when uh, when I had that kettlebell, it was just the one kettlebell. So I didn't have a lot of options. I didn't have a rack of dumbbells that I can go and pick different weights. And when I bought my second kettlebell, I had two. There were different sizes, but I just had the two. So in the beginning, you just kind of like, this is what I have. And that, to me, that's like a gift. But if you have a lot of options, just I trying to like think about why people would jump around or do different things is because they can, because there is all this availability out there. If you want to buy some weird program, you can do it for fairly inexpensive online. And if you don't like it, you can just move on, right? Um, but if you don't, like, I didn't have those options. There was no Instagram or anything like that when I was practicing. and and we were lucky, especially early on, and we were lucky to have any kind of availability to a learning resource. I think that's one of the benefits of today, but also again probably a negative in the sense that it waters down people's efforts. And what most of us need, especially in the beginning, is to establish a really good base with some foundational movements so that then we can add these more complex things. But even the people that are really good are usually doing very simple like programs. They're not doing this fantastic, multifactorial type of stuff, athletes, dancers, firefighters, policemen. Like the simpler the better, because then you can go live your life and do your job and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think some of the benefits seeing, hearing you talk about it on physical side is, it allowed you to get the training in, but still do a lot of things that you like to do, whatever that might be, right? For mentally, I think what it helps is you don't have to think about too many variation, because a lot of time when we get into a new program or learn a new movement, our nervous system, actually have to adjust to it. So you actually kind of feel weird. I was telling you before we start this conversation, I started my, one arm push-up training progress. I do a lot of push-ups, throughout, karate training, but by doing that one arm, it's not that much. I did 5 rounds of 5 reps, but then I'm feeling it, kind of weird sensation in the building. And I know it takes at least a couple of weeks or however long that it takes for me to adjust. So I think, and let me know if you agree to it, by, being simplistic, you actually working yourself to mastery, you knowing the movement so well. So when you get to one point that you really know those movements, then you can actually open up to, what did this movement actually will do to my body? And with your background too, you say that, by moving all this, movement, that I'm actually training stronger, not only to my snatch, you think it's an upper body exercise. And then I think you mentioned before, your jump actually increased a lot.
Yeah, I agree with you in everything that you said, because to me, it sounds a lot like a lot of people value this idea of the flow state in today's environment, right? I think that there's a lot of like people like chasing the flow out there and trying to figure out ways that they can get into a flow state. Now, let's break this down. If you're at the gym, even if you have your headphones on, right? You're going to do some traditional strength training, which is fantastic. I'm not down in it. I've done it myself. I do it myself. I train some people that way. But now you're in this very busy environment, right? And you're trying to quiet things down by having the headphones, but you still have to interact with the people like, are you done with that machine? Can I jump in? Grab the weights, come over here. There's all these things, right? But, in martial arts, we start by doing some light calisthenics and some breathing exercises, and then we hit those basic positions. And when I remember when we would hit that horse position, right? We would hold it for time. There was this just quiet across the room, and all you could hear was people like very light breathing, because people were in good shape. They weren't like heavy breathing or anything. And there's just like a peace to that. And so with the kettlebell, it's very similar to that. You take your kettlebell out to the park, you do your routine, you're out there in nature by yourself. You don't have to worry about other people. You're doing your one-arm push-ups. You can go into your garage, you can go to the park as well, because there's no equipment involved. There's not all these superfluous things. It's just the one thing, and it allows you to really focus. And when you do that, as you were mentioning, now you are getting more of the benefit, right, of the adaptation that you're seeking. And here's another part that I think we both agree on. It might seem like a big challenge in the beginning for some people, because you're doing something that is really hard, and it's going to take some time for it to get easy. But if you can just get over that, if you can practice enough to get over that part, that beginning part where you're in the cognitive learning stage, where you're just thinking about everything that you're doing, and you go more towards like the autonomous learning stage, then that is the payoff. And people don't spend enough time in the learning stages to get to that autonomous stage, so then they can enjoy that. This is easy, and it feels good. And I'm like lost in my own like thoughts and other stuff, It's not like, oh my God, this sucks. You know what I mean?
So as someone and as a trainer for many years with a lot of experience, and you mentioned them, martial arts, kettlebell, dance, strength, how do you personally decide when to stay simple and when to add the novelties? Like, do you have all this crazy question and answer going on in your mind all the time?
I think that because I am in the field teaching others, it's necessary for me to learn other things. Otherwise, I would have a very limited practice, right? I need to learn a lot
Mhm.
of other things. So one of the things I make sure to do every year as a coach is that I get more education and I go and take certifications, even if I don't think I'm going to use them or if I don't agree precisely with their methodology or something like that. I want to expose myself to that because you have to hear the other side of the argument as well, and it will make you better understand your side of the argument, right? So for us, we're sold, right? We don't need anybody to sell us more on the idea that I want it to be simple. I want this to be as simple as possible. So yes, I am constantly thinking about this, and also because at the end of the day, if we want to be honest with ourselves, we could be wrong, right? Maybe that's not the best way to train, maybe there is something better out there. And if I'm not open to that idea and at least trying it out every once in a while, I'm not going to be a very good instructor, and I'm not going to be a very good practitioner myself. But I think that it's necessary to explore it, but most of your time is going to be in the basics. So I'll give you an example. I spent all those 3 years practicing just like four moves, right?
Mhm.
But when I went to work for the original Iron Corps in Pacific Beach and I became an instructor there, it was necessary for me to do more fancy stuff because I was teaching classes and the students were very skilled. They had been there for a long time. It was a really robust community of practitioners. Many of them even went and got certified, and they were just students, but they just wanted the challenge. So they were very good. So you couldn't just come in and do the same basic thing in a commercial establishment all the time. You had to have some variety and some fun things for them to do. So you have to learn that. But here's the thing. I didn't have to really practice that because I had enough foundation to be able to do those more like what you would consider accessories or more complicated, but they're not really that complicated. The real complicated stuff is the basic stuff. If you can learn that really well, then everything is available to you. Everything. But you have to have that foundation, but it doesn't work the other way around. If you start with the really fancy stuff, like this is a good example. Let's say you get into kettlebells and you start to just like juggle kettlebells. You're just doing like this little flowy juggling routines, right? You're most likely not going to have the foundation to get the benefit from that, right? Because, like we were talking about, the little details, pulling up the kneecap, squeezing the glutes, breathing the right way, all these things matter. And if you're tossing a bell into the air without any of that foundational knowledge, what can you expect to get out of that? So you see like how the knowledge flows one way, but it doesn't come from the other side. If you just pick up a YouTube channel and start practicing like spinning kicks and jumping kicks and everything else, and you don't have your bow and arrow, your horse stance, your cat stance, all those foundational things, you're probably going to get hurt. One, and two, you're not going to be very good at it. That the skill in that and the enjoyment in that comes from the basics.
Yeah, I think what you just touched on can we spend like 4 hours just talking about that. So it's when you see that when some people go into maybe learn a new skills or take up a new sports, they pick it up so easy. They're moving with grace, versus, if you're untrained, you walk like a Frankenstein, right? So, but you didn't ask what that person have trained or being under before. Maybe they spend their whole life in sports, or maybe they're really mobile. That's what I want to bring me to this question to ask you. I really like what I learned from the kettlebell, like the when we call breathing behind the shields, and especially when we do at the end of the kettlebell swing on the top, we squeeze everything tight. I actually used that during sparring before. There are a couple of times that I was not able to block a front kick to my stomach, right? So what I did was, I breathe out as hard as I can, real quick, and it still hurts, but then it's better than me being kicked in the stomach with no bracing at all. So I do see the correlation with doing just the kettlebell swing and doing karate. But I wanted to ask you about the mobility. We're talking about hostile training. People will think that it's hard, right? You do a lot of grinding, a lot of hissing. It can actually promote mobility. Can you talk about that? How does the hostile training actually help us, especially martial artists, to become more mobile?
So the first part that is going to lead you to become more mobile is because part of the philosophy of the training is to move through a full range of motion. So that's the first
Mm.
one. The second part of it is that mobility oftentimes is linked to how your nervous system can perceive what you're doing as either being safe or unsafe. If your nervous system is not familiar with something, okay, it's probably going to be a little bit apprehensive about allowing you to do it. That's where familiarity and practice comes in. When we do this over and over again, we are lowering those threat levels in the nervous system and allowing us to express more performance. Okay, so what some people may experience as tightness could possibly be just a lack of familiarity with the movement or a general lack of safety about how they're doing it. Let me explain that. Let's say I grab the kettlebell, a really heavy kettlebell, by the horns and try to do a goblet squat, rock bottom all the way to the ground and come back up. With our technique, the one that you and I practice, we can safely do that. The same technique that you use to block that kick, or at least to brace yourself from like getting your wind knocked out when you got front kicked in the stomach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same technique. What does that do to the nervous system? Well, it says, oh, okay, well, Swire knows what he's doing, so I'm going to allow him to do this safely for more reps and to do it through full range of motion. But if you, let's say you and I are pre our days in hardstyle, we don't know how to brace, and we grab the same kettlebell and haphazardly try to squat with it, and we have no bracing in the abdominal area, and we go all the way down to the ground, and we feel that sheer pressure in our lumbar spine and everything just collapses, right? Your nervous system is going to try to prioritize your tissues over your performance, and it will like shut you down so that you don't do something that's going to get you hurt. So that is another angle that you can look at it, right? Is we promote this idea of full range of motion, but also the technique in itself is probably going to allow you to express more performance, which could be in the form of greater range of motion.
Mm. That's a really good point. It's just getting the body used to you doing weird movement, as in martial artists, right? What else would you bring up your leg or twist in a weird angle in any other things? I couldn't think about that, but when you're used to doing weird movement and your body allows you to do it, that's when you become more graceful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the power of practice, and that's something that both in both worlds share.
What advice would you give someone who is bored with the basics? Right? It could be martial arts, it could be strength training. We're doing all the same stuff all the time. You mentioned horse stance, you're doing the punches, like beginners and master do the same punches, right?
Yeah.
We are constantly looking for new programs. So how would you suggest we find the balance to get into basics good, get some practice in, then before seeking out for newer, more fancy stuff that to put into our, Rolodex?
Yeah. A concept that I find helpful is to look at this journey as a lifelong journey. Because when I speak with potential clients or people that I'm training with, one of the challenges is that there's this sense of urgency about getting things done in like the next 3 months.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I understand that. And if we look at the totality of all the things that we have to develop as human beings for a good, robust life, it's quite complex and varied. So 3 months is not going to cut it. We're going to need more than that, right? So when you start to expand that timeline, right, and you look at it, well, it's okay that I didn't deadlift triple body weight when I was in my 20s or my 30s. Maybe I'll do it later or something to that effect. Just understand that the best approach is to approach this like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Even into your 70s, 60s, and 70s, you should be able to strength train if you do it correctly. All of a sudden, now there's no pressure to do things next week or next month. Now you have this greater time scale that you can follow. Within that, right, you have initially you have to do the basics. It's the best approach that you can have. But in the middle of that, that is the time to flourish and try all these fancy other things. Because inevitably, and I'm experiencing this now as I'm going to be celebrating my 50th birthday in a few days.
Congratulations. Happy birthday.
Thank you. You have to start to pull back a little bit. Does it mean that I can't do the same things? No, but it's just not the same game, working with a 25-year-old body versus a 50-year-old body.
Mhm.
And it would be wise to acknowledge that and honor it, right? To just like try to maintain ourselves in as good health as we can, so we can continue to enjoy our physicality and our independence well into our 60s and 70s and maybe even 80s. My oldest client is 83 years old. Shout out to Kurt. This is possible. And when you look at it that way, it takes away that pressure. And the time to do the complex is after you've devoted a good, robust amount of time to building the basics, and you're in that high intermediate level. Do all the fancy stuff, learn all the crazy stuff, because inevitably at some point we're going to have to start to come down from that high. And it's inevitable. And so if you look at it that way, with that long timeline, maybe it's more manageable. I don't know.
I wanted to do a one-arm push-up since I was 13. I'm 48 right now, so I've been it's been a lot of years, but I think this time I really wanted to. You motivated me to do it. Like I put it off for a few years now. Now I'm scratching away, just going with the basics and following. This is what I need to do, and I know that as I get older, I need to rest more. I need to maybe do more mobility exercise, and so I don't blow up my shoulder. So I'm being smart, right? So there are things that you wanted to commit to. Maybe, I don't know where I heard this before. Your daily dose of strength training. You don't have to go big or go home. Like we always hear about no pain, no gain. You don't have to be pain to have gain. So you could practice. What if you practice something for 40 years? Do you think even if you do a little dose every day, you'll be really good by the time that you practice for the 40th year? Of course you're going to, but maybe it's not that up and fall that you see in the 10 seconds of social media or TikTok video, right? They go from 0 to 100 in 5 seconds. So it's just a different way of thinking.
I agree with you. And, if I have to draw up from my experience, most of the people that I've seen have this very fast approach to their fitness development usually end up hurt. And I'm not saying that to like rub it on their face or anything like that. It's just unfortunate. I care deeply about my community, the communities that I like work with. And I just want people to understand that there's a price to pay, and some things are irreversible. There are some injuries out there that will like really hinder you for a long time. Human beings are very resilient, and I'm not trying to scare anybody or anything like that. But we should honor our health by not doing silly things. Accidents will happen. I've had accidents. I don't want to get hurt, but I've had accidents. But we don't need to add to that by being silly and doing like things that are just a little bit childish, right? With this incredible like all out efforts, like you were saying, with the no pain, no gain and stuff like that. So just and this is again going back to the original the original part of the conversation, the similarities between hardstyle and martial arts. Martial arts promotes this humbleness and this kind of like just like dropping your guard and just being more tuned into like the spiritual part of who you are, instead of like being a tough guy, right? So I think that's also what we're trying to, well, I know that's what we're trying to preach with the StrongFirst and hardstyle curriculum.
So for a listener who wanted to reach out to learn about what you do, what would be a good way to get in touch with you?
Go to my website and connect me there. I'm very old school. I'm officially an old man, so I don't have any social media. I used to have it, not anymore. Go to my website, and if you shoot me an email there, just hit the contact page. I'll be there. I also do a lot of workshops in the Southern California area, so I will share my link with Swire so that he can share it with you guys. So any upcoming workshops that I have in either San Diego, Orange County, or Los Angeles, you guys can be aware of. In fact, I just did one in Los Angeles where you and I, wait, did we meet first at the barbell cert and then we met again in the bodyweight workshop? Is that how it happened?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
okay.
the sequence. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so I have just recently in LA, and it was really nice. There were some of the people that you met at that workshop were there. So that was a really cool experience. And so yeah, well, website, the link for the workshops, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for coming on to the show today. I'll definitely include all the links and then also article and then other podcasts. He talked more in details if you want intrigued by the end of kettlebell program. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. My pleasure.